Hey everyone, welcome back. So for this week, we're going to look at Chris Crocker as the example as we explore the STEPP. All right, so social currency, triggers, emotion, public, and practical value. And so last week we looked at the factors of spreadability, the difference between spreadability and viral. We're going to continue that by also talking about observability and viral marketing. But we're going to do all of this by looking at the case of Chris Crocker. So through that, one of the things that we noticed in that film, Me at the Zoo, is that fans become creators through participatory culture. And that's a really important component in this idea of why and how viral marketing is effective. Okay, so the beginning of YouTube was something that we started calling the web star. So we see that mentioned in our text. It's a little bit of a dated term. We know them today as the YouTuber, the influencer. But when we think about the historical timeline of where and how this originated, Chris Crocker was really at the forefront of that. And so this case study, starting with his love and his obsession for Britney Spears. And so Britney Spears, of course, now you've seen the film, but just again, thinking about who she was, especially in 2007 and the social impact she had on pop culture. So she was pursued heavily and relentlessly by the paparazzi. They really wanted to catch her at all moments of her life, good and bad. And she had a public meltdown. And so through this experience for Britney, Chris Crocker did a reaction video. And part of that reaction was a really heartfelt, emotional cry of just wanting people to leave her alone, right? So Chris' story, when we look at who he was and where he came from and how and why his love for Britney elevated him into this fandom that we came to know him to be, we can identify some of his roots in his own personal history and his difficult upbringing and how that impacted him as a young person and why he latched on so strongly onto Britney Spears. Part of that latching on is something that a lot of us do through participatory culture. So thinking of participatory culture again as an opposing concept to consumer culture. It's a culture in which private individuals, the public, do not act as consumers only, but also as contributors and producers, prosumers. So the term is most often applied to the production or creation of some type of published media. So Chris Crocker became spreadable content because YouTube grew and gave him a platform to have this spreadability. The result, of course, was that fan base of supporters and something that now we also call trolls, right? So the haters, trolls culture. He had this awe factor. It was hard not to watch him, especially during that time. He was pretty unique. And so people were wanting to see, who is this character, this over-the-top character? Part of that off factor was also this desire by a lot of people to want to hate him or to have a negative feeling, but still wanting to watch him because of that. So students from a previous class talked about this, and some of the way that they described Chris Crocker, and maybe you agree, is that he was authentic, and that authentic nature of who he was is what made him so spreadable, right? Another student quoted the Rolling Stones article that if you want to get famous, the first and fastest path is to attach yourself to an event that's bigger than you. And I would say we definitely saw that in the case of Chris Crocker with his attachment to Britney Spears. What are the results of observability and social proof from Crocker? Well, we see that in the case of people imitating what they observe, and that in turn evoking emotion, social currency, triggers, and social proof. So on the left here, we see Seth Green, who parodied Chris Crocker as part of that humor and that comedy. It was also done in nighttime talk shows. I mean, there was parody of Chris Crocker, this YouTuber that most people at this time had very little knowledge of who or why he was significant. But he was crossing over into mainstream. And so when mainstream started picking it up, then we see more of an attachment to that pop culture blending into this virtual space. In this way, seeing how YouTube grew because of that popularity. So another student noted that Chris Crocker opened the door for modern vloggers to be successful today and was at the forefront of the influencer movement. And I would agree, he really did pave this path into what we know today as YouTubers and many influencers. So making something more observable makes it easier to imitate, and monkey see, monkey do, i.e. that's the social proof, right? So if people want to imitate it, then you're gaining momentum in your spreadability. So, what was the viral marketing of Chris Crocker? If we were going to use that idea, how did we see Chris Crocker utilizing some of that strategy? Well, it was heavily dependent on the interconnectedness between peers. It included passive and involuntary submissions. It was relatable to younger generations. The parodies and imitations of Crocker embodied that, and it gave him a growing platform of people that wanted to see who was this character. It was an exaggeration of self, which is a marketing strategy for creating an online persona for others to attach to. So Crocker really embodied that and did that. There was a lot of other byproduct that ended up emerging from his own original content. We saw that with banners and games, memes, fans, trolls, celebrities making parodies of him, right? So he was featured on mainstream media and almost got his own show because of this growing popularity that was what was happening through that YouTube culture that was just being birthed. So it was a really interesting time of how that viral content started to take shape, right? So Crocker was chasing the viral after the Leave Britney Alone video. So once he got that taste of it, you could sense that this was something that he was eager to experience again and again, right? Almost an addiction. So the cultural significance of Chris Crocker, a student from last term noted that while he had many fans and people re-recording of his videos in a sort of parody, much of his content was curated to the experience of laughing at him and not with him. The Rolling Stones article called this Camp 2.0. Still, I can't help but find it sad, even if Crocker ended up taking this response to his early content and curating the rest of his persona around being someone people can laugh at. In my opinion, the reason that worked so well is intrinsically tied to the time period. 2007 being this flamboyant, gender-bending queer punching bag was something everyone on the internet could find joy in berating to a certain extent. But as he grew more popular and the response to his content became more and more bigoted, his world started to crash down around him. I feel that is a main reason his reality show is canceled, for example. The early internet was an unforgiving place. The internet still is, but it seems to me that these days content creators are a lot more careful with the way their image is perceived, such as that we no longer have people like Chris making content like that. So it really was a time period in which, you know, some of what we see today was being established and grew and manifested off of what was happening then. So just a review again of this STEPP, right? So social currency, Berger pointed out that this is of high value to make your information shareable. If everyone shares it on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Tumblr, and other social media, it becomes continuous and durable. In other words, this information becomes popular among people. More than that, it proves to be a source of influence. And social currency also makes a person look better in social eyes. The fact that you share something should give you satisfaction. Triggers. A trigger may be defined as something that is rather simple to remember about your brand, your idea, or product in order to make it maximally stick to one's memory. When you see, hear, and sense a trigger, you often think of brands automatically, right? They can be hidden slogans, logos, and mottos, and are catchy. They become good reminders of brands, spurring instant recognition. So following this, emotions. It's obvious that we estimate things and phenomenon by the emotions they evoke. Pleasant emotions, happiness, joy, awe, interest, gratitude, etc., tend to form a positive opinion, whereas disagreeable emotions, anger, hate, discomfort, sadness, envy, are more likely to form a negative. Emotion affect our attitudes to things, making a product idea go viral, the most powerful emotion, and force people to action, positive and negative, right? So emotion is a really powerful tool. Public, so publicity requires that the product idea be shown to public in order to spread them. The more times people see it, the more chance they will remember it and share the information among their friends. Observability, social proof, spreadable, participatory culture are a large web of interconnected connections. So now let's add practical value to STEPP, right? So now we add that other P. So practical value is the information should be practical and applicable. So you have an example here, Emma Chamberlain. Steeped coffee bags are definitely expensive, but they might be worth it. She's giving you some practical value. You might want to buy this because it might be worth it, right? So it relates mostly to tips on how to type of information. Every time you create something, you should think about what the value of it will be and how people can use it. So listicles, infographics, guides, reviews, FAQs, tutorials, advice, etc. All of these are practical value is a big component of how that content is created. It works like advice. We like to have it before we make decisions, and we also tend to share it with others who need it. So just think about how many times you ask someone or someone voluntarily gives you information about something that they really like, right? Oh, you should try this. It's really good. Well, there's some practical value for you. So providing practical value not only helps them get better, they might want to share it with people that they think will benefit from it. So next week, we're going to be doing our content creation strategy plan as our midterm, and we will be heavily reliant on the STEPP, right? So thinking about all of these components. So as we do this, just start now thinking about, this in digital marketing and brands. So who are they and what do they do? What is their social currency? How do they use triggers? What are their emotional hook? What is the public, observability, and social proof? How do they use their practical value? And are they successful? So if we were in person, I would be asking you to get into teams of 2 and finding a brand business that illustrates the STEPP and provides and emphasizes on practical value. The benefits and promotes sharing among their customers. But since we're not, I'm going to ask you just to do it on your own and try to find some examples of this where you can see the STEPP clearly in their digital marketing style and brand. Okay, so next week, our content creation strategy plan will be taking shape, and that will really give us the blueprint on how to strategically move forward with the content that we create as part of this class experiment. All right, I look forward to seeing what you guys do with this little exercise, and I'll see you next week.